Do you enjoy the Angel of Death series? Then head over to Stevie Jo's website to subscribe to her monthly newsletter. All new subscribers receive a preview of the current Angel of Death work in progress. Plus, all subscribers get free shipping on all orders for 2023. Head over to steviejoauthor.com to subscribe and receive the promo code. The Good Shepherd, 4th in the Angel of Death series. Now available in paperback, hardcover, and dust jacket. Order yours directly from steviejoauthor.com for the lowest price.
Hi everyone, I'm your host and author, Stevie Jo, and welcome to this week's episode of The Composition of Imagination. This is the show where we do a really fun background look into what made Angel of Death, what the characters are like, just kind of doing a lot of that fun deep dive stuff into this wonderful fiction world. And also, we kind of touch on here and there the fun ways we get the books into your hands. So, as always, I have my two book guardians with me for another fun and lively discussion, Tasha and Jason. And the last couple weeks, we had been talking a lot about the Kingdom of Heaven as it relates to Angel of Death. So this week, we're going to shift focus and talk about the Earth Realm. And I'm super excited because this is where we get into the meat and potatoes of it and really start to get like the story fleshed out and start talking about all of that. Now, if you haven't watched our stuff about heaven, I'll put links in here. So before we actually get into it, I do want to mention that this video is going to be a two-part series, as you can tell from the title. Welcome to Murr County, Kentucky. That is what the focus is. And today we are talking about Murlance specifically. Murr County is made up of two cities, and we are talking about the main city in this video. Next week we'll talk about Falshoek Mountain. This is going to be a great history of how Murr County was founded, and there's going to be a guidebook coming out after a while. There's going to be an Earth guidebook. I've got a Heaven one coming out in March, but after that is going to be an Earth one, probably about 6 months after that. And it's going to go into the history of Murr County, but not as detailed as this. So kudos to you for watching, because you're getting really, really special information that will not be written down in a book for you to read. So like I said, Murr County consists of two cities, Falshoek Mountain and Murlance. Since this is, the two-part episode, we're focusing solely on Murlance here, and it is a moderately sized city. So it's not quite as big as Lexington. If you've been in Kentucky and been to Lexington, it's not quite this big, but it's definitely not as small as like Brewston, Tennessee. And if you don't know where that is, that's exactly my point. It is not that small. So the best reference city I could think of when I was thinking of this video, and I think Tasha might agree with me, is St. Cloud, Florida.
Yeah.
It's small enough that you know a lot of people, and a lot of people tend to know a lot of other people's business, but it's not so small that when you go to Walmart, you see everybody you know. Like, there's still people that you're like, oh, I have no idea who that person is, and I don't care. And you just keep walking. So it's one of those good, moderately sized cities, and I'm sure we've all encountered a place like that somewhere, wherever we live. And I am going to put right up here a little map that I made just for my own reference that I figured I would share of Murr County, so that you can follow along where we are whenever we're talking about these different locations. So as you can see from the map, there is one main highway, kind of like in St. Cloud, how they have 192.
Yep.
This one Murr County has the Mountain Highway. That's what it is called. And it goes all the way through Murlance into Falshoek Mountain and just kind of dead ends into the mountain, which we'll talk about next week. So, obviously off of the mountain highway, there are the little roads for the businesses and the neighborhoods, all that kind of stuff. And there is more. It's important that you know there is more to Murlance than what is pictured on the map and than what I am talking about in this video. If you follow the main highway north past the Church of Life, you'll get into downtown and the rest of the city, but the series really only focuses on things that happen in this south side of town. Yeah. So that's why we've got just a map of that, because that's where the mayoral family lives, that's where all the hot places are to go to, and it's closest in proximity to Falshoek Mountain, so it's easier that way. So we're going to go ahead and get into the history of how Murlance was founded. So Murr County itself, the two cities, is about an hour and a half southeast of Lexington. So that kind of gives you, if it was actually on a map, you'd kind of be able to kind of guess where it is. The last census put their population at just over 5,000 known residents, and that's an important distinction. Wow. Because there are some residents that we don't know how many there are, where they are. We just know that they're in the mountain, and they do not do. We'll talk about that next week, but just know that the known number of residents is 5,000. Murlance was founded on July 6th of 1776. Yes, 2 days after Independence Day. So that's why they make Independence Day such a big deal in Murlance every year, because it is an Independence Day baby. They have the places like Liberty Forest, Freedom Park. That's all intentionally named because of their, yay, Independence Day. So they could, I do think like they could just celebrate on the 6th and call it Founders Day and have it separate. But where's the fun in that? Why not have all the fireworks and the to-do about the big city?
Give you an excuse to use even bigger fireworks.
Exactly. They can make it a bigger deal because it's a national holiday too. Plus it helps maximize tourism, you know. If it's like it's Founders Day and Independence Day, people are like, ooh, that's something I want to see. Yeah. So speaking of founders, let's talk about this. I'm excited. So the man who actually staked the flag and said this is officially a city in Kentucky before Kentucky was even Kentucky is none other than Robert Jericho, and he brought his wife Tilly with him. Isn't that a cute name? So he is James's, the current mayor, James Jericho. Robert is James's very distant grandfather. So from way back. So this is where the pure Jericho bloodline starts. When James traces his family back, this is where he can say, my family officially started here. And that's a big deal, as we know, because pure humans,
Yeah, that pure blood.
Yeah. So Robert Jericho was actually displaced. He was a traveler who was displaced from his original home in the New England area. And he went off to fight, of course, in the war, and got injured in the war. And while he was gone, his village, town, whatever, was ransacked, and his home was burned to the ground. So he had no place to go home to when he was not in the war for very long. He was only in there for a few months, maybe, and then he got injured. So he starts wandering and trying to find a place that he can call his own, because he's like, I can't stay here, and I can't fight in the war. I don't want to be amid all this anymore. So he goes off and ends up meeting Tilly at one of the places that he goes through and falls in love with her. They end up getting married, and by the time they actually get to what would be known as Murlance, Tilly was already pregnant with the first of their 10 kids.
Yikes.
Yeah, yikes indeed. So the founding itself is a little less glamorous than what Murlance projects itself as nowadays. which I think a lot of foundings of cities are. They're very, like, they're not as clean as what we like to imagine they would be. So basically, Robert came in, saw the area that is now known as Murr County, and just knew from seeing it, he was like, this land is unincorporated, and you know what? I'm just the guy to incorporate it. Let's do this.
That's what they always do.
Exactly. So he thought to himself, I ran a battalion of men for like, what, 6 weeks? I can run a town. It's cool. So
yeah, that sounds like a Jericho.
But it turns out, yeah, doesn't it? So clearly, genes run strong through that family. The problem is that when he came upon that area of what wasn't even Kentucky yet, creatures lived there already. And they already had a little village set up.
So it was like a Christopher Columbus thing.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. So
Christopher Columbus, huh?
Humans would not. So one of the ways that creatures managed to maintain this area for so long without humans coming in and taking over is, one, because humans were fucking terrified. They were like, it's predominantly lichens, and they were like, holy shit, I'm getting chased by these giant beasts. Like, what is happening? And not only that, but since this was all going on during, like, the Revolutionary War and stuff, the British were actually paying the creatures to kill humans so that they would not be able, they wouldn't have the numbers to fight back. This, obviously, having the creatures there posed a problem for Robert Jericho, right? Because the creatures were not uncivilized, and they were willing to talk, but of course everybody's afraid of them, so Robert's like, how do I approach this? So he decided to try to sit down with them and strike a deal. Of course, I'm glossing over some of the fighting and stuff, but it's fine. Basically, Robert was able to exchange the safety of him and his wife and their unborn child for some land. He just started small and was like, can I just have some land to build a house? Because we currently have nowhere to live. My wife is pregnant. We just got married. Please help a brother out. I've got a busted leg from the war. Like, help a brother out. And the creatures were like, all right, I guess.
We'll give it a try.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, So they provided kind of a plot of land for Robert to build his house, and he rallied a couple willing men to help him get it built. In the meantime, Tilly stayed with creatures who were kind enough to house her and help her through her pregnancy and all that. And in return, she helped care for their children, and they tried to teach her the ways of the creatures, like trying to blend everybody. Yeah. And she couldn't have cared less. She just wanted to be in her own house and deliver her own human baby, but she was playing nice for the sake of Robert, and because that's what wives did back then. Yeah, that's just what they did. Once Robert and Tilly were in their new home with their new baby, named Robert Jr., of course, Robert was Robert was like, you know what, this place needs something. So he asked if anybody around, any of the creatures, would help him build a church. He was like, basically like, y'all need Jesus. In a bad way. And the creatures were like, why? Like, we've been living like this forever. Who the fuck are you? And so that kind of caused a little bit of conflict.
And dang, Jericho's in their religion.
Exactly. Robert kept insisting that they needed to have Jesus and be able to be baptized so that it might help them not be the abominations that they were. You know, because that's how they viewed them. Creatures were abominations, and they were less than perfect. And in order to get into heaven, you had to be human, because that was perfection. So,
wow, how wrong that is.
Of course, conflict ensues, and Robert and Tilly, or not Robert, but Robert Jr., the son, and Tilly are actually almost killed for this. Because the creatures are like super upset that Robert's saying all this to them and trying to push all this on them. So it gets so bad that once again they find themselves homeless. Robert and Tilly and his son are run out of town, and they flee to an area about 30 minutes north where Robert happens to find more humans and support for his cause. So, Christian humans who were willing to help him end up going to that area, that southeast area of Kentucky, all while the Revolutionary War is going on. They're having their own little battle of their own that is like, give me some land, motherfucker. And they're like, no, you're trying to change who we are, and this is who we are. So it's a big battle and for dominance, and unfortunately, Robert Jr. gets killed. While he's still a little, the Lycans actually snuck into the Jericho's home and dragged him out to the waterfall and fed him to the merfolk.
Nice.
So that is how Robert Jr. ended.
That's pretty brutal.
Yeah. Oh, they were not happy. The creatures were not happy. So that was...
okay, similar to, white men and Indians.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, when you try to invade and stuff, this is what happens. So it was a really obviously traumatizing event for Robert and Tilly. And so Robert and his men go into the woods near the waterfall, which did not have a name at the time. It was just the waterfall. And they just start shooting creatures left and right. They've got their guns and they're just out there. Anytime they see a body moving, they're like, you're not a guy I came here with, so blam, you're dead. Like, that's what they do. Bear in mind, though, back in this day, they didn't know as much about silver bullets on Lycans as they do now. So the Lycans didn't die. It just pissed them off.
Yeah, I was
because they're getting injured and getting potentially fatal wounds, but they can heal from it with
it's not
time and
silver.
care. So they're getting all these wounds to them, and they're like, "What the hell, man?" So basically, imagine the human surprise, Robert and his men, when Lycans just didn't die like anticipated, and they just started coming back angrier than before. And to make matters worse, Tilly was pregnant again. So he had another life to worry about. And the Lycans, knowing she was pregnant, they were threatening to change her, to infect her with their Lycan genes so that the baby was born a creature, potentially.
Oh,
they
my
didn't know that would
goodness.
happen for sure, but they threatened it, and Robert was terrified. Because he's like, no kid of mine is going to be a creature. Again, the Jericho way kind of is being established here, right? So
it is a Jericho way, but at the same time, it's also the human way.
Yeah.
You know that whole, we don't mix the blood and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, everybody in America, at least, unless you're Native American, has some form of other blood.
Yeah.
To create who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, they call it the Great Melting Pot for a reason, right? But Robert doesn't care.
Yeah.
They
never care. That's the problem. They never care. No.
Yeah.
No creature will tell me.
So to prevent that from happening, because now Robert was like, all right, I've already lost one kid to these fucking Lycans. I'm not losing another one. And my wife. Like, that's the worst. So he finally, that's what it takes to get him to sit down with the creatures and try to come up with a truce. Essentially, the truce goes like this. The creatures would retreat, and they would only live in the land south of the lake, which is, now we know it as Freedom Park with, the lake right there. They would only live in the land south of that. And the humans would stay in the area alongside and north of the lake. That way there was no dominance land conflict. And on July 6, 1776, Robert successfully defended this particular territory from the creatures in order to start a new town just for humans, was his goal. The caveat that had to be included to make this truce work was humans would never ever build over what is now Liberty Forest. because that was the original hunting ground of the creatures, and they wanted to keep it that way because they had not yet all of them really hunted in Falshoek Mountain at the time. And you're used to doing something. That's where their normal food supply was, so they don't like being displaced. So the Robert agreed to allow the creatures to come into Murlance and do what they needed to do as long as no humans were harmed. So it seems fair, right? Everybody kind of wins.
It sounds like it, but almost too good to be true.
So, and here's a little history of why he named it Murlance. He decided to name it Murlance because Murr and Lance are actually old French terms meaning to strongly defend. And he felt that's what he had done for this territory. He strongly defended it. So that's why he called it Murlance. So knowing that that's how Murlance itself came to be, what do we think about that? Does it kind of explain some of the nuances about the Jericho family or James?
It explains how that family has the money they do.
Oh, yeah.
But also how the creatures know and for the most part can't stand the Jerichos because they have race memory.
Yeah.
So they probably remember all the way back, if not before.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, those people. And the fact that they've been able to sit there and maintain their power all that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm actually a little bit shocked by that. Because I know in some smaller counties and stuff, you do have families that
that have been there forever, and
they've said a steady succession of mayors and politicians and stuff like that. They're all from the same family. I mean, I see it in Mississippi all the time.
Yeah.
Funny story though is those things come to an end.
Yeah, they do.
And when they do, it's not pretty.
And the question really now for Murlance is, when will this happen for them? Will the Jerichos ever be overthrown and taken out?
And even if they were, I mean, will they go away?
We don't know.
That's the real big question.
It is because in the third book, Elias, third or fourth, why can't I remember? Elias says, "Hey, this has got to end. I'm running against you for mayor, James. So what are you going to do about that?" So now James is in a position where
you can't challenge me.
Yeah, and now James is in a position similar to Robert, where he was fighting against a creature for dominance. But I think James, I don't think he's as bad as it is what happened between Robert and the creatures. I don't think it's as bad as what James is doing, because James is talking even about genocide.
Yeah. He's not looking to, find a compromise. He's literally looking to exterminate.
Yeah, wipe them out.
And what would make the creatures more mad? That you're trying to, broker a deal between the two groups.
Yeah.
Or deal with a guy that literally has been sitting in his seat for what? Probably James, at least 20 years.
James was in his early 20s, and we'll talk about that later in this video as it gets to the modern time. But he was in his early 20s when he took over as mayor.
And he's sitting there running
And he's
around.
in his 60s now.
And he's running around sitting there saying, we're going to exterminate and all that stuff. He's lucky. And I would not be surprised down the road somewhere where that comes back to not only haunt him, but causes all the built-up frustration that creatures have had for the Jericho family all gets encapsulated into one striking moment.
Yeah. The next piece of this is one of the most fascinating to me. I did a history on the Church of Life because remember, Robert was like, I want to build a church, and that's kind of what started this whole thing. So now that he's got his land that his town or township or whatever, we can talk about what he did to get the church and how it came to be. The Church of Life, as it's known now, and has always actually been known, it has always been called the Church of Life. It was the first church of the city. So that does, whenever you read the books and all the people that go to the church, it being the original one to the city with the original name and a lot of the original structure, that has a lot of bearing onto its popularity. So there are other churches now in Murr County, but this one was,
OG.
It is, and it's the most famous, and so, that's why it has a lot of people.
Even though if you look at the, like your description of the church, it's very, I don't want to say plain, but it's very nondescript.
Yeah.
It's not like what you see around here.
Yeah, there's nothing super special about it. It's just the prestige of what it resembles.
Oh, yeah, this is the place, and everybody goes, it's a church.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we?
But it's the history.
It's the first one.
Yeah. So
it is the first one.
So this was, now the fun thing about that is it was not always the favorite of the town.
Yeah.
So the very first pastor, of course, was pure human. Robert wouldn't have anything else. And he preached the holy ways to live in a world where spawns of Satan, as he called the creatures, walked the earth. He was very, very traditional, that whole fire and brimstone traditionalist kind of preacher. We all know those. So he was very quick to just excommunicate anybody who had any kind of association with a creature. He was that strict about it. And Robert didn't care. He totally didn't care. So basically, creatures weren't allowed in the Church of Life in its first inception. And he had, essentially, because of his way of not having people, if like a human fell in love with a creature, which wasn't unheard of, he would not let either of them come to the church. And it even got so bad that the town, at the kind of behest of the preacher and of Robert, they were turning on each other. They would turn each other in for associating with creatures. Yeah, basically. So,
amazing what money does for people.
Yeah. And as a result of this, a direct impact of this kind of behavior, other Murlancers that moved a little further north and stuff went and started building different churches that would actually be more welcoming and have those beliefs that these people, and they didn't build just one, they built a few for all the different kinds of beliefs that were out there.
And then the other thing was they weren't run by Jerichos.
Yeah, exactly. But now, while all this was happening, of course, the Church of Life remained the most popular house of worship because of the mayoral family going there and running it. Because, you know how suck-ups are. They like to be in your good graces, and they're going to do what they got. Yes men is what it is.
Yeah. They're worse than yes men.
Yeah. So, Robert and Tilly, after Robert Jr. was brutally killed by the merfolk, Robert and Tilly went on to have 9 other children.
Yeah.
They were busy. And they actually taught them how bad creatures were by allowing their kids to bear witness to the tortures that people would put creatures through. So much like you said, like a witch hunt, it was like just a brutal abuse of creatures, verbally and physically. Nobody treated them well in this new town that was founded. And it was just a really bad time to be a creature because church, school, nothing was safe. So one day, the pastor of the Church of Life went missing. Gee, wonder what happened. So he was replaced, of course, by someone else, hand-selected by Robert and his little, group of yes men.
His cabal.
Yeah. And from then, really the teachings as pastors came and went, they were just so inconsistent. And there was a lot of turnover for that role because the church was starting to not be as well liked for those teachings. that they were doing, the harsh teachings. The overall message of mistrust and hatred of creatures remained, but the way they taught it was different from person to person. And all of that actually remained that way until about the 1950s and 60s. So you've got like a good almost 200 straight years of bigotry and hate.
Yeah, but you also got to realize, too, you're in a isolated part of the state.
Yeah.
So it's not like progressive ideas are going to filter their way in, especially when you got one family basically controlling everything.
Yep. So the civil rights movement that came during the 50s, 60s, whatever, saw a decrease in attendance of the Church of Life as people became more woke, as the kids say nowadays, as people started to realize you should not treat creatures this way. So when I talk about stuff like this, I think of Earth, and I said this in a prior video, I think of the Earth in Angel of Death the same way that we think of Earth in like the Marvel universe, where there's different versions of it, and like a multiverse. So this is not Earth 616. This is, I just call it alt uni. Yeah, alt uni, because it's the alternative universe Earth. So that's why like the 60s and stuff with the civil rights movement was more focused on creatures than other things, but it's still a race war regardless of how you look at it. So Murlance's founding church maintained its position through this whole time, which really hurt it. It reduced attendance and all that stuff, obviously. The things that remained the same also was the mayoral family. So at this point, some 200 years later, there have been a small handful of non-Jericho mayors, but the next in line always came back to be a Jericho. And the only reason there was a non-Jericho was because the other Jericho was too young to take the seat anyway.
I was going to say, probably lost some in World War I and World War II.
That too. They got lost and stuff. So now, during this time frame in the 50s and 60s, that's when James's father, John, became mayor. And John has a valiant effort of trying to get people back to the Church of Life. Now, when I say that it's a valiant effort, I don't mean he actually tried to change the way that they saw creatures and stuff. I just mean he tried. Like, he tried to get people back whatever way he could. So, you know.
He was bringing back bloody Jesus.
Right. So, his family, of course, the Jericho family is viewed as bigots around this time. So everybody's like, the fuck are you doing, Mayor? You need to change. Like, how did you even get in office? Oh, legacy thing. Yeah, okay, sure, whatever. Buy people off. Unfortunately, in the early 1970s, John was holding a press conference shortly after the birth of his first grandson, who we know as Regal in the stories. Shortly after Regal's birth, John was holding a press conference to address the fact that his new daughter-in-law gave birth to a creature and sullied the bloodline. So he was trying to address that. In what way, we don't know, because they did not write that down in the Murr County history books.
Of course not.
But what we do know is, kiss, kiss, bang, bang, John was killed while he was giving this press conference because nobody liked him anyway. The crowd creatures from the crowd ended up rushing the stage, and he was killed alongside several of his mayoral staff. So his funeral was held at the Church of Life, obviously, and for the first time in decades, the church was filled to capacity with people. Not all of them were mourning. Some of them were spouting...
I'll be birds in hell!
Yeah, some of them were spouting hate toward the Jericho family. A lot were crying because, it's like whenever the royals pass away and stuff like that. Like, a lot of people are affected by it who liked them. Hard to believe that existed in Murlance, but, whatever.
Hey, sycophants are sycophants.
Yeah, right? So, now, here's where things start to go Like, we thought it was going that way anyway, but no, it's really going down now. In his misery of losing his father in such a traumatic fashion, because James witnessed it. He was on the stage with his dad. He witnessed all of that. And so the trauma of watching his father get eaten alive by creatures was just so much. And the fact that his own son now is a creature. It was just so much that Mayor James Jericho couldn't have cared less about the Church of Life. He started hating everything about Murlance and everything. So the church itself continued to decline in both service and attendance, like way worse than what it already was. By the early 1990s, the congregation was only 23 people, including James and his family. So outside of them, it was like in the teens. And of course, James and his family would still go. He may hate it because it was, part of the reason for the whole hate and everything. But James figured at this point, praying was the only hope he had. It was the only thing he had left. He had to pray to cure his son. He had to pray to get people back in the same light. That was his whole thing. And luckily for James, 2 years after the first, he ended up having a second son, Noel, who is pure human. So that helped kind of save a little bit. And in the 90s, Noel took over as pastor and became the pastor of that little congregation of 23 people. And he started running things his way, which was much at the dismay of James. Because by this time as well, it is worth noting for future things in Murlance that we're going to discuss in a minute. Noel, by this time, when he took over the church, he was already married to Cordelia. And she was pregnant with Peyton, about to give birth. So he had his own little family to worry about. Mm-hmm. So Peyton's entire life was also in that church, much the same way that the other Jerichos were. So in spite of the traditionalist and often very cruel history of the services to come out of the Church of Life, Noel changed things, and he rested on principles of tolerance and unity. Like what a church should do. And after only 6 months of being the head pastor, gossip around Murlance made more people want to come to the service. People loved how passionate Noel was with his message, and before he knew it, the whole congregation was full again. So he had a whole church full of people. And of course, Skylar's big show, magical show at the end of the first book, spoiler alert's already in effect, when Skylar fucking rips a new one into Ezra at first, and she busts the windows and makes Ezra scared for his life in the church, of course people are like, oh, what's this now? And attendance rose even more. So it increased so much, actually, that Noel had to, between the first book and the second book, that year that we don't see, Noel actually had the church refurbished so that they could add a mezzanine on the inside. And of course they had to redo the windows because she busted those. And so they did a lot of touching up of things to make it better and to fit more people in it. So what do you think of the history of the Church of Life? Does it put it into kind of a whole new light? And, because Wesley is looking to be a pastor as well. So what kind of teaching do you think he would do?
He would probably go back to the original Jericho teachings.
We're bringing back the Dark Ages.
No, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as he lights up in book 3 and book 4.
Yeah.
About, doing this and this and everything. And when Elias deals with him, it's not.
Yeah.
And you really have to question a lot of things because his actions, he's going to be a preacher.
Yeah.
Yet everything he does is so anti-Christian, godlike, whatever.
Yeah.
That you have to go, this is the ultimate irony is that he says he's doing this, but he's really this.
Yeah.
Isn't that normally how it plays out, though, a lot of times?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know. I don't know any preachers that sit there and commit, mass homicides or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible, but...
No, but adultery.
Well, yeah,
divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having kids outside of wedlock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it depends
I'm not saying the pastor's a serial killer.
I'm
By
sorry.
the way, 3 or more victims, you're a serial killer.
Now you know.
Now you know.
And no one's at the battle.
You're just, I guess, angry.
Yeah.
3, you're a serial killer.
1, you're angry. 2, you're really angry. And 3, now it's a spree.
Yeah. Now
Wow.
it's a spree. Serial killer. But, I mean, I'm not saying the pastor has to be a mass murderer.
Yeah.
But if you really read the Bible, kids outside of wedlock.
Yeah. Well,
Adultery,
if you took all that
divorce,
stuff like at face value,
something like that,
by
I mean,
page, there's so many things that we'd be damned to hell for.
Yeah.
That you almost
Right,
don't even
that's
want to
what
wake
I'm
up
saying,
in the morning.
Well, and that's
But-
how Robert treated things when he first founded the Church of Life.
Yeah, that's how a lot of people.
And thank God Noel has tried to get away from that.
And if I remember my Bible correctly, a murder and telling a lie is the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A sin is a sin. There's
Yeah.
no hierarchy of.
There's no graduate of
Yeah,
sin.
it's not like, oh, you told a lie.
Be prepared for a lot of comments
I
on
know.
this one.
So you're bad, but you're not as bad as this.
Yeah.
It's from my just.
No,
from
that's
my
from a legal
teaching.
standpoint.
Yeah.
Just from my understanding and me being brought up in the church, that's what I was told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, depending on what religion you are, what church you went to, that might be completely different.
Right.
And this is the thing that I find most interesting about the creatures.
Yeah.
They outnumber the humans. But yet, they are tolerant enough
Mm-hmm.
to sit there and listen to James sit there espouse about how he's going to annihilate everybody and cure all the creatures, and if you're not in line, be prepared to die, and all this other stuff. When they could easily do just that. They could rush the stage and killed everybody up there, and nothing. Honestly,
they could take out every single Jericho and they'd never have to worry about it again. If they wanted to.
They could destroy the hospital and not even break a sweat.
Yeah. But they're choosing not to.
Exactly. They're sitting back, and that's what's the hilarity of why they're so obsessed with finding the cure.
Yeah.
When they don't realize how fortunate they are.
Very much so.
They'll realize it probably down the road somewhere.
Maybe too late. But so
I'm interested to see as the story progresses if the church actually makes it to the end of the saga.
Yeah.
Because I got a feeling there's going to be a showdown at the church, and that church is just going to get leveled.
And it'll be interesting to see how, if Wesley ever gets to graduate into being the head pastor, and what his message will be. That's why I brought him up, because he is the junior pastor.
Yeah, he's working on it, but I think the sins of the past will eventually come out.
Odd that they picked him.
But he's dating Peyton. So he's like in good with the family. So that has a lot to do with it.
I hate that term.
In good with the family? Yeah.
It just screams you're hiding something, dude.
Yeah. You're not too far off. So, for the other locations in Murlance, we really won't spend a whole lot of time talking about them because their history isn't quite as storied as, the town itself and the church. But they are definitely worth talking about because they are major landmarks throughout the series that we keep going back to. So, starting with Liberty Forest, which is the area that kind of goes right there next to the park, and it's almost right there on the border of Murlance and Falshoek Mountain.
Where the creatures live.
Yeah, that's where they go hunt and everything. So, this was, like I said, the original hunting ground of the Lycans in that area. So, of course, they were not too keen on giving it up to human ownership. That's why Robert's Treaty allowed them to still use it as a hunting ground. And he swore cross my heart and hope to die, that his family would never touch it, that they would ensure it is preserved for them forever. So things kind of get a little bit hairy in the early,
pun intended.
Yeah, in the early 1900s, 1910s, like that early time. William Jericho, the mayor of the time, were many Jerichos in at this point, he amended the county's constitution and the Murr County Treaty to allow Liberty Forest to be a tourist destination. So took away its real preservation and let people just come in. It was his hope, William that is, that doing this would bring money into the town, as it seemed to be in decline, basically. No tourism coming in, no nothing. And that's just, that's just a product of the times. Between the war and general disinterest in such a small Kentucky town, you don't get a lot of people coming in. So they charged a camping fee, and families from all over could come to explore the forest and camp there during the safe times of the month. So that's the key, because when William proposed this, the Lycans were like, all right, listen, if you're going to do this, I guess we can't do anything because it's not technically our territory, but they're like, we cannot have campers during the what they call the 3-day cycle of the full moon, which this is now called the full moon law. So basically, they can't have campers in the woods the day before, the day of, or the day after a full moon. Mm-hmm. And the Lycans said, listen, if they're told no, you can't go in there, and they choose to do it anyway, and then they get attacked, that's not on us. It's at your own risk at that point, man. Like, you can't. So that's why it's called the full moon law. And it actually set a precedent for other cities in Kentucky and around the world to make their own type of full moon laws. So look at Murlance getting on the map for something in the early 1900s. So the law does still stand to this day in Murr County. It is very much a part of the law. So do you think, my question about that is, do you think that a law like the full moon law would hold up in this version of Earth, in this day and age? Because remember, we're talking about, alternate universe Earth.
Oh, hell no. No, politicians wouldn't let it stand because, they're losing money. They don't care if people. So you think they would sit there and let a law that would keep people out for 3 days? That's 3 days worth of revenue coming in.
3 days per month.
Yeah,
too.
That's 3 days of revenue that they are not getting. That they can't tax or anything like that. So no, they wouldn't let that stand. So, we don't care if a few people die.
So what I'm hearing is the alternate universe Earth is a little kinder, in spite of some of its very extreme beliefs.
The alternate, they have a law, but the thing is they still hate anything that's non-human.
Yeah,
so
they do.
Even though it is funny because the humans are well armed. Mm-hmm. But yet, why don't they just go in, National Guard that thing and just, mow it down row by row? Because they know where the Murr people are. Mm-hmm. They know all the Lycans hangouts, so to speak.
Yeah.
St. Guis, that's a little more dicey. But come on, where one of them.
Well, but you don't, because then you're talking about kind of going on a genocidal rage.
Well,
they're exterminating a race in a non-acceptable way. At least James having the Verham Labs and all that, that's his guise of, I'm trying to cure you.
Yeah, with my new goose-dipping morons in their outfits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh wait, my bad. Task force.
Yeah. On the southwest edge of Liberty Forest is Freedom Park. And that's always a super busy place for locals and tourists alike. That's where, they've got 6 propane grills. So this is like a super decked out park. They are proud of this park. Here's what they've got. 6 propane grills, pits for bonfires on the beach, a dock with boat rentals, tons of yard games donated by the communities for others to enjoy, and then they host a variety of events throughout the year. So they'll do weddings, birthday parties, holiday celebrations put on by the city, and every time the city puts on an event, it's free to come. So that's kind of one of those like, oh wow, they're not charging for all their money-hungry selves. They're not charging for anything. So that's kind of...
That is kind of cool.
It's a super, like, they're proud of this park in Murlance. So, let's see, typically the community comes together when they do these free events. They come together to do a bake sale, and that's always arranged by the mayor's wife or partner, whomever they have, because the mayor helps foot the bill for the actual event to paying the vendors and all that, and then the wife is in charge of making sure all the vendors are actually doing what they're supposed to do, set it up right, and she gets the community involved in a bake sale, because not to be like 1950s Leave It to Beaver, all the women bake stuff, but she does it because it's a good way to raise money to preserve Liberty Forest.
Oh.
So that's why they do that, because...
So the Jerichos actually do have a little bit of goodness in them.
Yes.
Because they are protecting the forest. But it's, as you say, it's kind of dual edged. Yes, it's holding up their end of the bargain. But at the same time, we're keeping the forest good so tourists will still come in.
Exactly, so they can still rake in money. And of course, they don't waive camping fees during this time or anything. They just make the food free and provide activities. Mm-hmm. And then if the community loves to get together to do these bake sales because they know it's going to a good cause, and it legitimately does. It's not like James tries to embezzle it for himself. They have enough money. He is not that money hungry. He is just hungry for a cure, is all it is. He's not necessarily like that. So,
and it's good tax write-off too.
Yeah, right? So, because he needs more reasons to do that. So, of course, the Independence Day Festival, which comes up in Book 5, it's the moment we've been waiting for. The Independence Day Festival is the most popular and well-known celebration because of how big the mayoral family allows it to be. They go all out, and you will see Sylvia actually setting stuff up for this in the 5th book when we count down literally hour by hour to the festival.
Do you start?
It's a one-day book.
Oh my God!
And
you really did a 24 episode as a book.
Kind of. You start at 15 hours left because it's like the start of the Verham Labs workday, and then you get down to 0 hours when the event happens. So that's a really exciting thing because starting here in book 3, Elias is running for mayor, and they are the kind of competition is that James has to come up with a viable cure by the time the 4th of July festival rolls around, or else he has to drop out of the race because he's proved himself incompetent to hold up to his word. So that's what we're waiting on. We're kind of gearing towards that. Now that book 4 is out, we're heading on to July.
It ain't looking good right now.
So... just kind of going back to the whole blessed implosion and things like that, who do you think will win? Because Blessed Implosion is the name of the 5th book. Who do you think will win the mayoral race?
That's the title?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That's...
Based on what has happened so far, who do you think will win the mayoral race? Elias or James?
Ooh.
I'm gonna go Elias. Just because I don't think
I want to say Elias.
Yeah.
Too.
If they have it now,
yeah.
Why putting now you're just putting a time frame on it.
Yeah, and they only have a month.
yeah, you couldn't have done it all. You've not been able to do it all these years.
Yeah.
What makes you think you're going to be able to get it done within a month or 24 hours?
Well, James could still steal it though by sitting there because he's not above fudging numbers and data.
Yeah. Oh, and I thought about that.
I would like to believe it'd be Elias because just the way, one, he doesn't put his neck out.
Yeah.
Unless it's pretty full, it's pretty ironclad.
Yeah.
That he can pull something off. But it is the Jerichos, so they're not.
Well, you have learned already in this video how like conniving and sneaky they can be.
But that's the other thing though, because and this is obviously speculation.
Yeah.
But if you look at the domino effect, James were to lose, there goes the funding for the labs, which in turn is going to sit there and set all the test subjects lose.
Yeah.
And the thing is if the cure doesn't work, they've got all this weird stuff in their system that could react differently under different circumstances, and now they're going to be running free. You're going to see all these dominoes fall, and it ain't going to be pretty if he loses.
Yeah.
Which, I would still say it's pretty cool because, he needs a lesson in humility.
Yeah.
Same thing for O'Cordy.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Like I said, it's one of those, that's going to be the book to really look.
Yeah.
Each book, I look forward to each book. But that one is, if it's the one for the election, which they're building towards.
Yep.
Which is kind of funny because you really haven't ratcheted up the pressure, even though it's there reading it, until, like, almost the end of the fourth book.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
Because now we're only like 2 weeks or a week and a half or something away, and it's like, oh shit. Now you can kind of see we're kind of shift gears to like houses and other things of Murlance. So on the little map that I have, you can see that most of the mayoral family, because the map has the names of where everybody lives on it in their houses. So most of the mayoral family and all of the characters that we focus on in Angel of Death, like I said, live on the south side of Murlance. Some live in homes that they rent or own. Others live in Freedom Park condos, which is right on the park, and they can see the lake. Even in book 1, Wesley makes a comment about Ezra living in Freedom Park condos, and he can see the half-naked women on the beach from his window. Like, that's so James actually keeps wanting. So here's where it gets interesting as far as, remember the bake sale to preserve Liberty Forest?
Yeah.
James actually doesn't think anybody knows, but Sylvia has heard him talk about how he wants to further develop Freedom Park condos and start getting into Liberty Forest, so they've got more land to do it on. So she has really, for book 5, she has really amped up the promotion of preserving the forest, because she does not want that treaty to be broken between the creatures.
Because she knows that if it's broken, then it's going to be all out war.
And they've already fucked up so much. He has this son that's a Lycan that he refuses to acknowledge, so that looks awful on him. So she's trying to save face,
and running
Verham Labs.
Running Verham Labs.
Yeah.
Having a brother that's one of the test subjects.
His son being
one of them.
Yeah.
And all this, and he has absolutely no remorse because of his obsession with finding a cure, which ain't happening, dude.
Yeah, but you can see, knowing the history, where that obsession comes from because of watching his dad get mauled by creatures.
He deserved it, though.
He did, but it's still traumatizing. It's worth noting that the house that James and Sylvia share is the original Robert and Tilly Jericho house from 1776.
Why do I get the feeling at some point, way toward the end of the series, they're gonna burn that house in effigy, or the creatures are gonna the war's gonna build
take
up.
it back and.
Well, no, it's just as a final. Okay, the Jerichos and the creatures are no more, so to speak.
Yeah.
And they take out the house.
Yeah.
As a final,
like a final fuck you to the Jerichos, like.
In a way.
Yeah.
Or maybe the Jerichos, what's left of them.
Yeah.
The good ones, I'd say. They finally get everything smoothed out, but the creatures still have that. They have the race memory.
Yeah.
Of all the bad things that the old Jerichos did.
Yeah.
And they know that house.
Yeah.
And they just sit there and they destroy it as a final symbolism.
Wouldn't they also do that to the church though too?
I could see that happening, yeah.
Because
that's one of the pinnacles too.
Well, this is the thing. Of the casualties that are coming up.
Been there since, what did you say, 1703?
Yeah, no. This is why.
Yeah.
This is the interesting part. Is somewhere down the line, church is going to get destroyed because one, of all the history.
Yeah.
Two, Noel's not going to be there to protect it.
Yeah, because he can't live forever.
Yeah, I was going to say
only human.
At some point. I got a feeling there's a little more to it than that, but that's just me. But he won't be around to be able to protect it. You can't count on Wesley because, that's a whole nother thing to unpack.
Oh boy, wait until you read book 5.
Both the house and the church at some point in the story I know the church is probably going to get destroyed.
Yeah.
Just because there's going to be a throwdown and a lot of magic's going to be involved.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how these historical landmarks that, the reason we talk about these things is because to me, they're as much of a character as James and Skylar and Cordelia. Like, the places that we go to are as much of a character because of the history they hold and the importance to the characters themselves. So that's why, and I keep saying that the town is like a character because it has its own kind of motive and vibe and everything. So, to make it more realistic. So, but yeah, he actually, James has, going back to him and Sylvia living in the original house, like that's where Regal, Noel, and Kaylee grew up in that house. So naturally, obviously, it's not the exact same house from 1776 because
but the same foundation.
Exactly, he's remodeled it for the times, but it's the same foundation.
The creatures still
he's tried to maintain a lot of its original integrity, like people do when they buy antique houses and stuff. So, but I just thought that was interesting.
That is very interesting because you figured between your house that was originally built to his time, somebody would have burned that thing to the ground 2 or 3 times.
There's always been a Jericho to protect it, to strongly defend it, as we said, what Murlance means.
That's going to be your new word.
Yeah.
Strongly defend.
Yeah, I'm just going to say we're Murlance in this shit. That's going to be a verb now. So, aside from the houses where all of our characters live, there's a little street that comes right along the border of Murlance and Falshook Mountain, and that's where like James's office is. The town hall is there, and we don't really venture into James's office. There are several press conferences at the town hall, but we don't have to go into detail on it because it's literally just a town hall. Like, it's a building with
you have people. Yeah, I was gonna say you have people there, but other than that,
it's not a big. It's just where some things happen for political reasons.
Old Sonny. Yeah.
So, let's see. More important than those things, though, down that same row where which you can see on the little map, down that same row where those buildings are, is Healing Hands Hospital. So this has quite a little history of its own as well. So let's kind of go into that. The basement of, currently in this modern world of Angel of Death, the basement of Healing Hands Hospital is home to Verum Humanoir Lab Corp, which we call Verum Labs for short in the story. So there are other hospitals in the town, just like there are other churches. They're just in other locations, and this one just happens to be the most storied and one of the another original building to the city. So Healing Hands Hospital is actually considered the most prestigious hospital in the county. So the history...
Money buys a lot of awards.
Oh, it does. It does. So it was actually founded in 1862 by Prudence Jericho, the wife of the mayor at the time. What a name, right?
Yeah, Prudence. Yeah.
So Prudence wanted to have a refuge for the wounded because this was taking place during the Civil War, hence the year. So she wanted to have a refuge for the wounded in their area because she felt like none of the soldiers had a good place to go. It's important to note that Murlance at this time, even though they didn't have a hospital, they still had doctors, but they only made house calls. They didn't have an actual place to go.
Prairie.
Yeah, and they would just, with their medical bag, they'd go to the different houses. So there was no actual building for them to do anything in. It was all done at home at this time. So the problem with Prudence's original hospital, which was called Healing Hands Hospital from day one, the problem with it was it started out really primitive because, truthfully, Prudence had no medical training. She didn't know what the hell everybody needed. She just was trying to do something good on behalf of the Jericho family. So it's got like, So she really had no idea how to make a functional hospital work. So she got
all that money.
Yeah.
And she couldn't even find somebody, through correspondence or something.
1918, whatever.
1862.
Oh, they could send a message. No, she could still. They had
carrier pigeon.
Yeah.
No, they still had Pony Express and
stuff.
You
can Google that shit.
How to make a hospital. So
dear sir / madam.
Yeah. So what she basically did with this Healing Hands, the first kind of iteration of it, she basically just hired a bunch of doctors and nurses who kind of specialized in trauma, wartime injuries, because they had already been working in the field. So she said, hey, come here and help me with this hospital. Will you help run this? And they were like, yeah, all right, if you pay me enough. And she's like, I have all the money. Take all the money and just make this right. So for the up until Prudence founded Healing Hands Hospital, like I said, they had no brick and mortar, so this was their new thing. And as it became heavily populated by the wounded and dying soldiers, there came a concern for the cleanliness, because remember, this is 1862. Penicillin hadn't been invented yet. We didn't know much about how to keep things sterile and clean. So
there's no reason why there's a saying called bite the bullet.
Yeah, exactly.
So because of this.
That's kind of what it was like being in there. So cleanliness became an issue, and Prudence was like, all right, y'all, seriously, Murlance is now going to be known as the town that tried to have a shitty little half-assed hospital, and it's dirty as fuck, and we can't keep the soldiers alive. So can we clean this up, please? She was a lot more active than a lot of mayors' wives were, and she had better intentions than some of the
And
Jerichos.
She wasn't going to stand for some nasty hospital that she built.
Yep, she was
that didn't know how to run.
Well, and she was like, I can't have my name attached to something like this. My husband would kill me. So basically what she did, she used all the money she needed from courtesy of her husband, because the Jerichos were very well established by this point. And
they're bona fide.
Yeah, and she worked hard to make these changes, to make it better and make it cleaner and get the doctors more education and stuff like that. So this, to me, this next series of years of changes to Healing Hands Hospital is really where the Jericho family kind of starts flashing their true colors a little bit. Like, they're not like Joseph with the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat and is like, look at my coat. They're just like, hey, you want to see something cool? Like, you know, just showing you a little wink of who they really are. And it's not always good. So, as modern medicine advanced around the world and got integrated into the U.S. medical system, things like the penicillin and all those kind of helpful things, Matthew Jericho, who was Prudence's husband, the mayor at the time, was like, all right, I agree with you. We need to church this hospital up because I ain't letting this town be left behind. My family's worked too hard on this. So he agreed and was very adamant about kind of working hard to establish Murlance and make it. He thought, you know what would really make Murlance awesome? Let's be known for science and medicine. That seems to be the way of the world. So,
all right, Lexington.
Yeah, right? So, he wanted to be recognized as a viable competitor and was noted as stating in a press conference about this. He said that science would be the only way to truly bring peace between creatures and humans.
No.
That was his quote for why he was doing this.
Well, at least he didn't pray the creatures away.
Yeah, right? Like James was trying to do after his death.
Yeah.
So he knew clearly that there's going to be a lot of money in medicine and science, and he didn't want to miss out. Which, I mean, that's not wrong. There is a lot of money in medicine and science. You just have to know how to do it.
Well, yeah, there's money to be had, but at the same time, you got to produce some sort of results.
Yeah,
it's not like,
exactly. So that's kind of where he's going, as you can see. So Matthew and Prudence, they invested in better education and training for the physicians at Healing Hands Hospital. And by the 1900s, because remember, it all started in 1862. So by the 1900s, Healing Hands Hospital was able to produce vaccines for Murlancers and residents of surrounding counties.
Vaccines?
So, you know,
getting no vaccine.
So, you know, the doctors, the nurses, the research staff, they were and do actually continue to be among the highest ranking in the region. So, you know, kind of like here we have UK and stuff like that. They are equivalent to that in this universe. So, which does kind of fulfill part of Matthew's wish to be among the best cities in this part of the country.
That does work.
So it sounds like all good things so far, right?
Yeah, but there's something under the surface.
I mean, it's a Jericho who's actually helping, and this didn't hurt anybody. It legitimately helped somebody.
Why do I get the feeling they did unauthorized human testing?
Well, no, not yet. So here's where we start running into a little bit of problems. As Healing Hands Hospital grows, it, obviously receives remodels, keeping up with medicine, that kind of thing. The Jericho family decides that, okay, this is great, but nobody's really working on this creature thing. We're just healing people, and that's awesome, but maybe we want to heal or cure people too of creaturism.
No.
So I'm thinking that we set up a privately funded lab in which to do that. So that was kind of the Jericho family's way of thinking. So it would be something that they would use to perform research on and about creatures. This privately funded, little lab separate from the hospital. So by the time John Jericho, which was James's dad, by the time he comes into office in the late 50s, so little scientific information is actually known about creatures, even though humans and creatures have lived alongside each other since forever.
Nobody's bothered to study.
But no one's bothered to study because there's been all this conflict going on. So, of course, John was wanting to change all of that, so to speak. And, but he still wanted to maintain dominance over the creatures while trying to change all of that. So that kind of shows we're starting to see those flashes of color again, where it's like, here's my greed.
It's kind of funny how even though these characters, have all this money and stuff, yet they have such a really bad case of inferiority complex.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's like, oh, well, I'm going to cure the creatures or I'm going to kill them because they're wiping us out because the humans have to be the dominant species. Yeah. And I'm like, why is it we always have to be the dominant, How many things have we made extinct in this world because we had to be dominant?
Yeah.
And it's sad.
And at this point, when John is mayor, the creature population is steadily growing.
It's steadily growing, and the funny part is, by your history, they're not doing anything. They're they're doing their regular hunts and what have you. I'm sure that they have every year people disappear.
Sure.
But it's not like the creatures are actively hunting all the time and everything, and yet Jerichos are still sitting there. That deal they struck way back then, I don't agree with it. Great grandpa was stupid. I'm going to change it and kill these guys. And that's kind of the way it feels. Because all the atrocities they did with the original Jerichos.
Yeah.
And then they kind of went underground because they got such a bad name for all the atrocities they did. And then they slowly built themselves back up, even though the whole time they stayed in positions of power.
Yeah.
And then they get to this point, and it's like, ta-da, I'm going to kill all of y'all.
Yeah.
Under the guise of curing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of how they figured out how to get that goal accomplished by, oh, I'm gonna cure you, and in reality, I don't give a shit if you die. I just want you gone.
But they could sit there and use the DNA.
Maybe.
And no, they probably could. They could probably get basically pure creature DNA and be able to send that off and sell that off to other medical companies.
Just depends on what their priorities are. Do they care about that, or do they just want the creatures dead? And
they do want the creatures dead, but there's certain attributes that creatures have that if they can reverse engineer it, they can sit there and be able to heal wounds. Like if they have a really bad wound, it would heal on its own, and they wouldn't have necessarily creature tendencies.
Right. It would just be a nice So, well, try as he might, John never got this privately funded lab off the ground before he died. So that never actually happened. So then we fast forward a few decades and enter the 1990s. So,
oh, yay.
As we said before, by this time, James has been mayor since John's death, back in the 70s. And his son Noel is old enough to take over if he wants. But Noel doesn't want. Noel ends up going to be pastor at the Church of Life. And he's got his own family that he's started. He's married to Cordelia. He's got Peyton on the way. That whole thing. And, I won't get into a lot of Cordelia's character traits and stuff here.
Because that's for a later.
That is for later. But just know that James and Cordelia really hit it off because they both share that hatred of creatures. They both want creatures
the embarrassment.
Gone. So Cordelia has actually spent her entire life working to research how to cure them and return them to their human state. So she's not necessarily looking to eradicate creatures. She does kind of want to just return them to normal. But she'll also do it by any means necessary.
Exactly.
So it's just a bond that her and James share, And James actually helps her start a private research lab that finally opens its doors in the early 2000s. So now we're getting really modern.
It took 10 years to get it off the ground.
Well, in the 1990s, not necessarily 1990 itself, but it did take a while
at least
to get it off the ground. And they called it, this privately funded lab that they finally got open, was called the Danes Genetic Research Center, or the DGRC for short, because that's a lot to say. So
DGRC.
This DGRC totally put Murlance on the map because it was the first of its kind. No one really had a small private lab solely dedicated to the kind of work Cordelia wanted to do. So it very much put Murlance on the map, and as pioneers often do, the DGRC inspired many others to open and do the same things as the years went on. So really at this point, Murlance is just kind of on a high, and kind of perceived as being on a high. So we're going to pause for a second and say, what do you think of its progression to this point?
I mean, it's good that they were focusing on science, because especially if this was in our actual reality,
yeah,
I mean, that's something that you don't see very much. And actually, you're really starting to see some aspects of that in Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah.
Because you'll see commercials all the time about the
ARH.
Yeah, ARH.
Oh yeah.
Where they're like reaching out, getting into these smaller communities.
Yep.
And
Hazard.
Yeah.
It's not just Hazard.
I know.
No, they're big down there in Eastern Kentucky.
But it's just like St. Clair down at Moorhead.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a small regional, and they've been able to partner not only with the university but also UK, and they're getting better.
Yeah.
But like how you described Healing Hands, how it started, so rough, and it slowly started building itself up. And they did it looking at science and medicine and taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Not just, well, okay, you got somebody coming in, yay. And basically funneling through or shuffling through all these different doctors and nurses.
And that was courtesy of Matthew and Prudence. So of all the Jerichos that to run the county in the history, they are the ones that really
They're like one of the few that are they actually really want to do good for once.
And they did. They did do well. Now, the consequences of it may be coming back to bite them in their graves because it's not being used exactly how they had hoped, but, whatever. So, all of that hard work and decades of research in the DGRC, this is where we get to the sad part, but you'll actually enjoy this because we're going to talk about the incident. So, all of that hard work that James and Cordelia poured into the DGRC for all those years, and remember, we're talking like modern day now. It's getting up to almost where this book begins. So, 4 years ago, from book 4, it's 4 years ago, the DGRC was burned to the ground in what would be known as the incident. So when you read book 4, it's 4 years before the start of that book. Yeah.
So that's when the incident?
The DGRC was burned to the ground.
Is the incident.
Is what it centers around. Yes. So, here's some, I know, it seems weird, right? So, you're like, why is everybody making this big stink? But think about it. The DGRC was Cordelia's life work. Like, she had been working on this even before she met Noel and married him and got in with James, and James helped her build this lab. So when the DGRC got burned to the ground, Delia was able to salvage what few things she could, but really it wasn't enough because she actually... No, I'm not going to say it because that will spoil things. Let's just say that the things she wasn't able to salvage, because it'll spoil things for future books. The things she wasn't able to salvage was stuff that really could have changed the course of these books.
Oh, yeah.
So, she, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I can't remember if it was book 3 or book 4, you know, it goes into a little detail on how close in her mind.
Yeah, she was.
I think it was.
She was this close to a cure, an actual, honest to God cure.
And she's been trying to replicate it,
and she hasn't been able to.
But if I'm not mistaken, in I want to say 4, she's finding out that the DNA that she used on the original process doesn't work as well on the current creatures because their DNA is different.
That will get touched on.
I was gonna say, and that's why they're having such weird reactions.
Yeah, that will be touched on because the DGRC, the Danish Genetic Research Center, they did some pretty questionable things and got some pretty radical results. So it's something you find out in book 6, book 7. It just kind of starts evolving itself as you learn more things about it. So, let's see, Cordelia, she was after the burning of the building and everything in it pretty much, she basically was like, oh my God, I have to start all over on my cure. So she was devastated. And so was James. And of the building itself, and this is something that is important to note, of the building itself, only one corner beam remained standing from that fire, and it has actually been converted into a hollowed out oak tree that provides elevator access to the underground of Healing Hands Hospital where Virham Labs is. So that's their secret back entrance to get in. Everybody else has to go through the hospital and go through security and go down into the elevator and do all that. But
bunch of cheaters.
So they kind of repurposed that. So basically now what we're looking at, we're coming into almost exactly when in the beginning starts. 8 months after the incident, James and Cordelia contracted space within Healing Hands Hospital for their new and improved research center. So their goal was to maintain privacy and keep it out of sight of hate groups or curious competitors or even mythics. If that kind of tells you stuff about the incident, which you already know she blamed Skylar for. So that kind of helps lead into that a little bit. 6 months after the contract was signed, so now we're looking at, what, a year and a half later?
Yeah.
After the whole thing burned down, a year and a half after the incident, the brand new underground research center, known as Virham Humanoir Lab Corp, or Virham Labs, was built. So, as far as when the Good Shepherd goes, for a timeline, Virham Labs is still a baby. It's only been around for about 3 years. Thereabouts. So it's still a new little lab, but it is known as the True Human Lab. And of course, the conquistadors who work there are known for being ruthlessly aggressive, kind of like the WWE in the early 2000s. It was, you know, like what you had said about when we were speculating in the last video about Carmen and her, like, fear of, you know, the knowledge and all that. I think Cordelia falls into that vein of, I've been burned once. Literally, I've been burned once. I'm taking every measure possible, and people that I hire better work their asses off and take no names and get this done.
So it makes you wonder if Chloe Jo actually interned under Cordelia back in the old...
It does. It does make you wonder, like, who all was involved.
Well, obviously, you know the Jericho children were.
Of course.
In some form or fashion.
Yeah. So, but they really did, like, James and Cordelia, when they hired people for conquistadors, they were like, y'all need to have the same level of not giving a shit as we do. Because we need this cure, and it's already been taken from us once, so now we gotta work twice as hard. And you've gotta be willing to do whatever it takes to get it.
You have to kill everybody.
So, pretty much. So, and then in just a few short years, so that brings us all the way to current books. of Angel of Death, what you're reading, in just a few short years, Verham Labs has expanded itself deep underground, 6 floors below Healing Hands Hospital, and they added the new wing where patients can be housed for live-in treatment, which in The Good Shepherd, they so kindly call it the Death Lab.
Yeah.
So that is, and we are seeing the impact, and you will continue to see the impact of this as the books progress. So then now we will pause and ask kind of, what do you think about the history of Verham Labs? What do you think it says about its present? And do you think, now that you kind of know a little bit more, do you think that you can pin down exactly what happened in the incident yet?
Well, it was.
I'm giving you little crumbs here and there.
I will give it. I love the fact of how you describe the labs underground, because it's like it started out. It was probably maybe 2 floors, and now it's 6. I'm like, man, this is something out of one of those out of like a video game movie or something. I mean,
like Resident Evil when they had the hive.
Yes, in a way, and I always looked at it like that. I was like, if you're gonna have a pseudo-evil group, that's the kind of lab you would have.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny, all the work that she put into it to be nondescript, secret, away from eyes, and look what's happened. Everybody knows where it's at.
Yeah.
And you seriously, you're literally almost using the books as a countdown to, okay, when's this one gonna blow up? Because everybody knows, everybody in town knows. You can't lie about it.
Yeah.
And as much as I hated Sonny, hey, kudos to the man. He sat there and stood up and did something.
So do we think we can piece together a little bit of what happened in the incident now that you know a little bit more of the backstory? Or is there still not enough? Not quite.
I want to say there's a setup. Because obviously they were getting too close to the cure. So a mythic, I like how you pointed out they said mythics. So they don't want mythics because, well, they're obvious power.
Yeah.
And somehow Sky was used as a pawn. Or maybe she did fully freak out. And burned it to the ground. Because everybody blames her for it.
Yes.
Yet, she doesn't have very much of a memory of it. Even though she could sit there and tell every single moment of when she lost control at the church and at her place. When she destroyed Azer's truck.
Yep.
Almost destroyed him.
I was just like, yes, that was therapeutic.
Damn near choked out Chloe Jo.
Yep.
I mean, all these things, but yet she couldn't remember losing control and using her power and basically blowing up a building.
Literally burning a building to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she can't remember that, and everybody else has differing remembrances of it. Cordelia, James, I want to say Wesley, and Derek have something to do with it. Because Derek, I think, was engaged to Peyton at the time.
He was.
And right after the incident...
At the time of the incident?
I think they were still together at the time.
Nope.
They weren't?
Nope.
Oh, so that happened before.
That happened
after.
That's
slimy.
That happened, the incident happened
No, when they broke up.
Oh, yeah. When he vanished. Left her stranded. Peyton is super... Oh, do you not like Derek?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I know who... No. No, I told you about that one.
Okay.
We know the players that were involved.
Right, in the incident. Yeah.
But we don't know how it transpired. Other than somehow Skylar was at the scene when the building burned to the ground.
Yeah.
But that's about as clear as it is. And even Peyton's kind of, you know, throwing cold water on that because she's not even sure if that's even true.
Yeah. That's the history of Murlance and the
that is
things within it. And
I will say that's a hell of a history for a town. That thing's got more stuff going on than you know, county wars between two cities.
Yeah,
you know?
That was just our wrap up. We'll wrap up our tale of Murlance, and I think it was a really great introduction to Murr County. Mm-hmm. The whole reason why I wanted to break it down this way and talk about the city first before talking about the people is because it's my hope that it will provide you, the reader, with a more well-rounded perspective on what you're reading, so that you kind of know where all these people came from, who they are. And like I said, this is stuff you're only going to get on this channel. This is not going to be really written down much of anywhere, and if it is, it's not going to be this detailed. So you have a special look about, tell your friends if they want to know about Murr County. Tell them to watch The Composition of Imagination, because we've got it going on with the history. So next week, like I said, we're going to talk about the history of Falshook Mountain and do the same thing that we did with Murlance, but with that. And that has a really fun history because it's so magical. So this is where we get into the suspend your disbelief, and it's all magic from here. So that's...
It only took us 7 videos to get to the pure magic part.
So that's what we're talking about next week. Be sure you subscribe so that you can keep watching these things for part 2 of Welcome to Murr County. And just a quick reminder before we go, as I've been saying, the first 4 books of Angel of Death are currently available on StevieJoAuthor.com. They are discounted from buying them from other locations because when you buy from indie creators, we have that ability. We can't do that on the big website. So go on there. You can request an autograph in the book from me. You can choose from hardcover, paperback, dust jacket, all that fun stuff. Just go on StevieJoAuthor.com and order your books there. And so then be sure you like, comment, and subscribe, all that good stuff to stay in the know. And speaking of comments and things, let's see what we want you to do for this comment section. What do you think the incident is? Now that you've gotten a few more pieces to that backstory, what do you think it is that happened? I'm curious. So thank you so much for sticking with us through the end. We really appreciate you, and we love you, and go out there and kick ass, because we know you will, and we'll see you next week.
Catch up on the Angel of Death series today. The first 4 entries are now available directly at StevieJoAuthor.com. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to The Composition of Imagination to learn more behind-the-scenes info and stay up to date on the fun and lively discussion.